Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video, we are looking at CoreWeave. It is time for another update. And today, once again, we will be discussing a failure of holding the internal levels of support for continuation in our initial 5-wave move to the upside. Now, don't get me wrong, I remember explicitly defining that the area of support we were tracking for continuation to higher prices was not a trade setup. It was an area of support we were looking to hold to be able to track afterwards, after the 5th wave to the upside, a reliable 5-wave pattern, and to be looking for this to actually work out to form our initial 5-wave move to the upside and our initial wave 1 up for a high probability trade setup to look for positions into. Now, since this has failed, it has quite some bearish implications. We were discussing all about this in the previous video as well, but today we will define additional levels of support and of resistance. So by the end of this video, you will know which pattern and structure is more likely to form, which levels must be broken for a signal that a more substantial bottom is in place, and to shift the probabilities in the favor of a more bullish scenario, as well as the levels that once broken, in terms of support, we would need to be prepared for a more direct descent into even lower prices, potentially into a reset of this wave 2 in white, potentially into something even more bearish. Now, before we get into all those details, I would like to go quickly through the larger time frame for any of you who might be new. And here we have been tracking on this chart an initial 1-2 setup for which I provided you this exact area of support between the $97 all the way down to the $48.5 ever since we started covering this stock. So it was around this time frame, around July, maybe late June, when we first covered this chart and we had our initial wave 1 to the upside. We were looking for a 3-wave correction into the area of support to fulfill the minimum expectations in terms of a wave 2, and we were even considering a potential bottom in these lows initially, but since we failed to hold internal levels of support, we were preferring a reset of this wave 2. We had no strong indication that this structure was going to manage to form the 3rd wave to the upside in a very direct fashion. Yeah, it wasn't that it was impossible, but we were cautious of looking for positions in a low probability structure, so we were tracking an extension that has been delivered once we extended, yeah sure, a little bit higher within this correction, but we have here a large A, B, C structure now complete, where once again we don't need any additional extensions to lower prices for a correction of this wave 2 to be complete. Now, nonetheless, we have been tracking, of course, levels of resistance for extensions to even lower prices, because even though we have a full count once again within this wave 2, we do not have any signal or confirmation that this structure is going to extend to higher prices. We have not broken above the $127 level. This could very easily still extend in an A, B, C pattern to even lower prices, as right now we have a complete A, B, C pattern in a potential wave B in this area, meaning that a supposed wave B in our orange interpretation is complete. It doesn't need any extensions to higher prices either. That is why we were looking for an initial 5-wave move to the upside to build, even if we didn't break the area of resistance, to provide an additional confirmation level that a more substantial bottom would already be in place. That has failed to occur. Yeah, that wasn't actually even our initial structure that we were tracking within this area. We have been focusing on this blue idea of an A, B, C pattern to unfold, but we were considering a potential 1, 2, 3rd, 4th, and the 5th to form in the yellow structure, for which we had the area of support down to the $84.9 level, which would have allowed a 5th wave to still unfold from the bottom of a correction in a wave 4. Now, since we have failed to extend to higher prices within this yellow structure, I cannot track it anymore. I cannot look for a high probability initial 5-wave move to the upside in a wave 1 to start our larger wave 3 to the upside. And having only built an A, B, C pattern within this area doesn't provide us a high probability area of support to look for positions for continuation to higher prices. We are in a very high risk area, in my opinion. Now, it depends from which time frame perspective you are looking at this, because if I am to zoom out, we would still be within our larger area of support in white. Technically, this is still part of our accumulation area for this stock, for this chart. As long as we hold here the 78.6% retracement, we are still tracking with high probability continuation to higher prices, potentially in a wave 3. However, if I were to zoom in from this time frame perspective, we could theoretically be looking for a 1-2 setup, but with only a 3-wave pattern available internally, this is not going to be a high probability structure that would strongly suggest we should expect continuation to higher prices. Once again, within the orange structure, this is a potential wave B that would be complete. We extended perfectly into the 61.8% retracement, which was a highlight level for us. If you remember, a couple of videos ago, we had a top in an internal wave 3, we had an area of support for a wave 4, and we were looking for a 50 to unfold to the upside. This level was my highlight in that video for a potential top to form in our 5th wave, to complete our wave C in blue. Now, without looking too much at what could have been, let's focus on what we have at hand. So once again, we have an initial 3-wave move to the upside. This could theoretically work out in a larger 5-wave pattern, but it would only do so within a larger leading diagonal, meaning it will be very difficult to look for high probability structures to form internally in this area. In this wave 3, in yellow, I would only expect to build an A, B, C pattern, and it would be much more difficult to identify a clearly bullish trend, because unless I manage to form an initial 5-wave move to the upside in a wave A, I will not be given the opportunity to look for such an extension, and even then, I could track this just as a larger A, B, C pattern still. Now, nothing really we can change about the structure that has already formed, but we can track an area of support for continuation to those higher prices at the levels between the $91.6 all the way down to the $72.3. If we break below the 78.6% retracement, it would be strongly suggested to us that this structure is much more likely to unfold in a direct fashion in a wave C, meaning that a wave B top is in place and we would be looking for an internal 1-2 setup in this area. And unfortunately, we have an additional bearish sign within this structure, because in this push to the downside, I am actually able to track an initial 5-wave pattern, which is suggesting that with higher probabilities than not, we would see an extension after a 3-wave correction into an area of resistance into at least another 5-wave move to the downside. Now, depending on how exactly this structure unfolds, we may be looking at something more or less bearish. I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to track what would occur beyond that, because we could theoretically form an internal A, B, C structure in a wave 2 in yellow and still manage to extend to higher prices. And I'm not even denying the possibility of already having a wave 2 bottom in place. But for me, the probabilities remain high that we form at least another extension to lower prices within this area, at least within an ABC structure that I will be tracking here in a blue interpretation, because this could theoretically work out for both interpretations, orange and yellow, in one way or the other. Don't get me wrong, we are tracking an ABC pattern in this area in blue. Could very well turn in the orange interpretation in a 1, 2, 3, 4th and the 5th. Nonetheless, we would be tracking the same area of resistance between the $87.5 all the way up to the $104.3. If we manage to break above the 78.6% retracement in blue, it would be a strong signal that this structure is much more likely to have already formed a bottom and extend in the next wave to the upside. Now, whether that is in a wave 3 in yellow or a wave C, potentially in a reset of this wave B in orange, I cannot tell you at this time. We will actually need to wait for some evidence, and depending on how this internal structure unfolds to the upside, we may get this additional indication or not. Now, we have clearly defined the level of resistance we need to break. We have defined the level of support that must hold for the probabilities to remain in the favor of each interpretation. Right now, we are in between them, and we would need to track the internal structures for additional indications on this chart. We do not know the clear answer of what will unfold within this area, but right now I do prefer an extension within at least another low. Whether that is in this area of support in yellow or not remains to be seen. I would not assume this as of yet. Now, internally in this structure, unfortunately, it's within a very small time frame, and I wouldn't trust the structure too much. It seems quite bullish. We have risen, what is it, like over 20%? Yeah, over 20% in one day. So I wouldn't necessarily rule out potentially something more bullish to be going on, but at the same time, I am still quite skeptical. However, for continuation directly to higher prices, I would be watching here the levels between the $83.4 all the way down to the $77.3. Now, I'm not necessarily sure how to define this area of support. I mean, in which color? I suppose we could be using blue. This could be working in both interpretations as well. So we could be looking here at a potential A, B, C structure to unfold from this time frame perspective theoretically. We would like to see another high, but once again, this is within such a small time frame that I do not have a clear pattern. I couldn't really tell you if this would be a trustworthy formation in a 5-wave move, in a 5-wave pattern or not. So I'm cautiously watching this area of support for continuation to higher prices. Below the $77 level, I would be strongly prepared for a more direct descent. Yeah, potentially even in a wave 3 to the downside in the orange interpretation, in the orange wave C. So to be clear, we aren't assuming too much of the counts that would unfold within this structure, within this pattern, within this entire move, to be honest. But we would have strong levels of resistance that would indicate, if broken, that the structure that would allow a direct descent to lower prices would be much less likely to unfold. Now, unfortunately, since we cannot reliably track in this area a series of 1-2 setups, I cannot be looking for an impulse to unfold. Even though, theoretically, for this idea of an internal 1-2 setup, we didn't necessarily completely invalidate it. We have broken the relevant levels of support. I could show you here briefly on the chart, but yeah, let's have this in white for a moment. But yeah, we have broken a couple of times below the 78.6% retracement here and here, and I don't trust it. I don't think it should be trusted, and I am preferring extensions to lower prices based on the structure alone. But as always, don't focus too much on the count. Yeah, we have the levels. We have the levels that indicate to us what type of pattern will unfold. We have the levels. We had the levels previously that told us this initial wave 1 to the upside wasn't going to occur within the leading diagonal. We have failed to hold the levels of support. We will be watching the next levels of support and resistance for continuation to higher prices. But as of now, these are the levels. This is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what else you want me to cover, and I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.